I don't just talk about other people's stuff, I also make my own. Books in particular. To date, I have 4 books you can check out on Amazon. Operation Red Dragon: The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, Occult Mafia, Emerald of Maddox City, and the short story collection Assorted Absurdities, Tales of Kaiju Punk and Other Genres. Hop on down to the description for Amazon links to all 4 books. Enjoy whichever ones you read, and enjoy the video. Ladies and gentlemen, a moment of silence for the live-action Netflix Cowboy Bebop. Okay, that's enough. Yeah, in case you haven't heard, Netflix's live-action Bebop has been cancelled after just 1 season. That's how poorly received it was. It's not even the only poorly received Netflix production of something people have a heavy dose of nostalgia for that debuted this year. And yet, it's the only one that doesn't seem to be getting a second season. Actually, I guess that depends. You'll hear some reports saying that Masters of the Universe Revelations doesn't actually have 2 seasons. It had 1 season they produced that they decided to break in the middle and claim was 2 seasons. I'm not here to debate whether or not that's true. All I know is that Cowboy Bebop had 1 season, and it's not getting any more. And it's not like it because it reached the end of the story, either, like the original Bebop. No, it was clearly setting up a second season where they were going to bring in Edward, as cringe-inducing as that was, but apparently that's how poorly the series was received. Nobody wanted a second season. Heck, we were getting arguments from some people saying that it's supposed to be bad, that all of those bad changes were intentional. When the best defense you can come up with for something being awful is that it was supposed to be awful, you're in trouble. You're really in trouble with your production. And to be clear though, I know what it looks like when something is deliberately trying to be bad. Look at something like, say, The Lost Skeleton of Cadavra, or Thanksgiving, or movies like that. These are movies that are intentionally going for campy, silly, we're making a schlocky film, look at how schlocky it is kind of stuff. That means it doesn't take itself seriously, so when you watch it, you don't take it seriously either. That's a roundabout way of saying those films are comedies. Whereas Cowboy Bebop was clearly trying to be taken seriously. Even with the Marvel-style quippy humor, it was still trying to be taken seriously, still trying to be competently made, and it was still that bad. I don't think it was deliberate. I do not buy that argument for even a moment. It was just an excuse people were making to try and justify this thing's existence. But now they don't have to justify it anymore, because it no longer exists. Or at least it won't exist going forward. I'm sure that first season will still be available for a while, but yeah, my recommendation remains the same. If you're gonna watch Cowboy Bebop, watch the original anime. It is much better. As I've continued watching it myself, I will say that it is funnier than I remembered it originally being, but it's not funny the way that the live-action one was trying to be. It had a smarter kind of humor to it, a more subtle kind of humor, and I'm not saying that to try being pretentious, I'm just saying I think it's a better brand of humor, and one that is certainly more fitting for the style it was aiming for, as opposed to whatever the live-action movie was doing, which is, as I said, what if it's Cowboy Bebop but Marvel instead? But you know what? Since it's done, there's no reason to keep talking about it anymore. As Nathan Marchant of the Monster Island Film Vault suggested I say, see you, Space Cowboy, and good riddance. Thank goodness the original is still available. For the moment, at least. Pick up physical copies while you still can. And yet, as one franchise falls, another rises. Around the same time we got the announcement of Bebop's cancellation, we also got this trailer for Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Now, you may recall that the first Sonic the Hedgehog movie was one of the more controversial films to come out in 2020, or at least one of the ones that had the potential to be really controversial. When that trailer first dropped and we saw Sonic's live-action design, obviously a CGI design, but how he would look in a live-action world, he looked like this, and it was horrible. I mean, there were some angles where you could say that this design looked okay, but it didn't look good overall, and there were certain times where it just looked plain ugly. What we wanted was something that looked more like Sonic and looked good overall. Something that would have looked good from any angle. We got it. Sonic was redesigned to look like this, closer to his original design, still with the textures and still with those other elements, but now he looked more like Sonic, and this worked so much better. According to the behind the scenes, they didn't really change anything else about the movie, but the fact of the matter is, if we had gotten the same movie with that original design, it would not have worked. You have to have a design for a character like that the audience can visually connect to. If they're repulsed by it, then they're going to not connect with it. So thank God they went with that design, and thank God the movie actually did turn out as well as it did. As I said in my initial review, I don't think the first Sonic the Hedgehog movie is the best Sonic movie we could have gotten, but I do think that if we had to have a first Sonic movie, it was about as good as we could have hoped for. Again, they could have done much better, but given the potential for how bad it could have been, it's a miracle it turned out good at all. Now, moving forward, you gotta start introducing more stuff that's familiar to the games. You gotta introduce more characters, maybe put more emphasis on the characters we actually want to see as opposed to the characters that we don't care so much about but are thrown in there just because they are using the stock scripts, I guess. So, now we have the trailer for Sonic 2. How does that work? Also, if you hear Dynamite barking in the background, she's just barking at things going by. I don't know what. So one of the first things that I noticed about this trailer is not so much of this guy. Not so much of the new live-action characters in general. When we got the trailers for the first movie, they were featured far more, because they are major parts of the movie. This guy especially, whose name I can't be bothered to remember. I'm talking about the character, not the actor. He was clearly there to be the human anchor because the studio feels like you gotta have some kind of human character, even though most people who were going to see a Sonic the Hedgehog movie were going for Sonic the Hedgehog. It did leave some concerns that it was going to be like an Alvin and the Chipmunks, Garfield sort of thing, where there was more focus on him than there was on the character we actually wanted to see. Luckily, I think the first movie struck a balance where you could see that they were necessary, those human characters, but the focus was still predominantly on Sonic. He had the arc, he had the major focus, he scored the victory, it was his film at the end of the day. Now we're looking at this trailer and we're seeing fewer of those characters. There's still a lot of Robotnik, of course, and we'll get to him in a moment, but as for the characters that were introduced brand new in the first film, we don't see so much of them. We get a little bit of this guy at the beginning, and then that's it. We don't really see him doing much again for the rest of the trailer. What we do see is Tails. Tails is very prominently featured, and apparently they kept his voice actor who's been voicing him in most recent projects. Good choice, in my opinion, because that's a good voice for Tails, and it works with this character. I mean, granted, they didn't bring in any of the voice actors who've been voicing Sonic previously. They did still bring in a voice actor for live action, but the voice they went with for that design did still fit him. Maybe they just decided that they already had this character, so may as well, but either way, Tails is looking good. Tails looked good when he showed up at the very, very, very end of the first movie in the mid-credit stinger, so it seems like they didn't have to redesign Tails too much. They already learned their lesson by that point. I don't know if that scene was added, like, last minute or what, but luckily, Tails does look good. And the characterization, well, we don't really see much of Tails' full characterization here. We get a little bit of the sense that he's much younger than Sonic and maybe a bit more timid in certain regards, but also fairly brave in others. But we don't see too much of Tails' personality on display just yet. We just know that he's there, he's going to be with Sonic for most of it, so we've got that classic team-up going now. And again, like I said, looks good. At this point, I don't have any reason to assume that Tails will somehow be butchered. I certainly hope not. I mean, after what happened with the first movie, they easily, they being everyone in the production, they easily could have said, screw you guys, we've got our design, we're sticking with it, when there was that backlash to Sonic's design. Instead, they went, okay, we get it, you guys don't want this. You know, now that we're looking at it, I think we don't want it either, so we're gonna change it, we're gonna fix it. We'll delay the movie. I know that there's that conspiracy theory that it was all just a marketing stunt. I don't believe it. I really don't think that was the case. But either way, they could have just said no. But instead, they went with it. They realized what was going on. It at least gave the impression that they actually cared. And given how the movie turned out and how the focus was mostly on Sonic, he wasn't sidelined in his own movie, I think they do care. I don't know if they care as much as some of the people who devote their time and effort to making videos about Sonic online, but they do care enough to at least try and get it right. So I see no reason to think that Tails will somehow be the weak link. And of course Jim Carrey is back. He's rocking that classic mustache and the bald head, looking a bit more like the classic Eggman. He's still not rotund, but it's Jim Carrey. He's just usually slim. And nothing seems to have changed there. He still looks like he's doing well. Robotnik was actually one of the few things people thought looked good in that initial trailer. They were thinking, okay, well, at least Jim Carrey's doing well. Even I thought that. And now it seems they're going back in the direction of making him... They're edging closer and closer, I think, to classic Eggman. And, well, we will see. Like I said, it looks pretty much the same. Clearly he is still the major villain here, but he's not the only villain. Ladies and gentlemen, Knuckles. Yeah, talk about making an entrance. We always kind of knew that Knuckles was going to be in this movie because we actually saw the echidnas at the very beginning of the first movie when we were in Sonic's world, whether that's being called Mobius or not. But we kind of figured, next logical step. Knuckles is one of the iconic Sonic characters, right up there with Tails and Dr. Robotnik. It makes sense you would bring him in. Plus, he's got a very interesting story, starting out as a villain, becoming a hero when he realizes that Robotnik has tricked him, stuff like that. And of course, initially, there was news that he was going to be voiced by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. And when I was discussing this with other friends, I thought, you know what? That makes sense. Then it was announced that he would be voiced by Idris Elba, which we were thinking, okay, that came out of nowhere, but hey, Idris Elba's a good actor. As long as he actually gives a good performance and doesn't phone it in because he thinks it's stupid that he's voicing a cartoon echidna, I'm down for it. And based on just the one line that Knuckles has in this trailer, it sounds like he's going for it. It sounds like he's going to give this a good performance. He also looks great. He does look like Knuckles. Again, no need to redesign him. They're clearly sticking with the idea of taking the way they look in the original video games and animations, updating it for live action, sticking mostly to that basic form, making alterations where needed. For example, giving the characters snouts as opposed to just protruding black orbs where their noses go, or things like that. But otherwise, Knuckles is still looking good here. And again, that entrance, the way they introduce him in this trailer, this makes me excited. I am looking forward to seeing how they handle Knuckles here. I'm pretty sure I know how it's going to go because whenever Knuckles is introduced in a new series and he's not already part of Team Sonic, he's usually an antagonist who eventually becomes one of the good guys as opposed to sticking with the bad guy. But even so, just because I'm pretty sure I know where it's going doesn't mean that I'm not intrigued to see how they handle it. And I hope they handle it well. I'm also going to go ahead and make a prediction. Since movies with that sort of story have recently been bringing in the idea of introducing another villain to sort of serve as a new physical antagonist for the hero and his former opponent to team up against, I'm gonna guess that maybe Metal Sonic will show up. At first I wasn't so sure about Metal Sonic showing up because he's more of an older character, and if you were going to bring in another antagonist, I thought that Shadow the Hedgehog might be the more obvious choice. But based on the story they appear to be telling here, Metal Sonic seems like it would make more sense. Sort of the Mechagodzilla that Godzilla and Kong team up against, you know? But I don't know that for certain. It's possible that they figure they don't really need a Metal Sonic, they can just have Robotnik and his robot armies doing their usual thing. But whatever the case, if Metal Sonic shows up, I called it. And I'm sure a post-credits scene or maybe mid-credits scene will show up that introduces most likely Amy Rose. That she'll probably be the next obvious choice for a character who's going to turn up. Of course, I'm hoping that they bring in even more characters. Bring in, is it Vector the alligator? I think that's his name. I don't see him as frequently these days. But also bring in Shadow, bring in Sally Acorn and the Freedom Fighters. Heck, I actually have an idea for how you could bring in Sonya and Manic from Sonic Underground. Not gonna spoil it here. If Paramount wants to know what it is, they gotta pay me. But I'm down with this universe so far. I want to see them continue. I want to see them bring in these other characters and really bring them into the mainstream. Although, speaking of which, moving forward, there is another thing that I've noticed this trailer hasn't done, yet I hope the movies gradually move closer to doing. It seems that most of the settings in this trailer still look like real-world locations, which tells me that most of the action will probably be taking place on Earth once again. There are some scenes that look like they go to other areas, like obviously where Robotnik finds the Chaos Emerald and presumably Knuckles as well, but again, mostly looks like it's set on Earth. If I had to guess, that's probably just a cost-cutting measure. It's cheaper to realize real-world areas than it is to build the crazy worlds from the games and the cartoons from the ground up. And you know what? I want to see them go to those other worlds. I want to see them eventually branch out, have a movie that's fully set on Sonic's world, again, whether they call it Mobius or something else. But you know, if it really is to cut costs, as long as the money that they are saving on these strange alien worlds is going towards making the characters work in whatever it takes to make them work, voice acting, animation, good fight scenes, things like that, as long as they're doing that, I'm okay with them staying on Earth for just a little bit longer. Eventually, of course, if these movies continue to do well, they're gonna have to start branching out. Because part of the draw is that these stories take place in new worlds, in exotic locations. So I hope they eventually get there. For now, though, if they must stay on Earth, as long as everything else works, I'll be okay with it. But everything else has to work, that's the key. So anyway, there's a twofer for you. Live-action Cowboy Bebop is dead, live-action Sonic the Hedgehog has risen. Boy, I can't say I'm disappointed with how any of this stuff that I've discussed has turned out so far. But we will see what happens with this second Sonic movie. I really hope they get it right. There is plenty of room to improve from the first movie. I just hope they made those improvements. It looks like they did, but only time will tell. We'll see come April, I guess. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni viewer signing off.
Congratulations, you reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, you might want to consider supporting us on Patreon. Of course, the other way to support us is to go to Amazon and check out our books, Operation Red Dragon, The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, The Occult Mafia, Emerald of Maddox City, and Assorted Absurdities, Tales of Kaiju Punk and Other Genres. Also check the description for links to DeviantArt and other platforms we operate. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.